Hello everybody. Today I'm going to talk about how to write great poetry. Uh, to quote Stephen King, to write well you need to do two things. Write a lot and read a lot. And I think that this is true of any kind of writing, that you basically need to put in the effort and it's a lot of input output. Now I'm going to break these down. Now in terms of writing a lot, you've got to write, as Stephen King says, you've got to write at least 2 hours a day, minimum. 2 to 4 hours a day if you want your writing to improve and if you want to write in a professional manner. Now, for me, I started writing lyrics when I was 11 years old, and I wrote hundreds of songs with really crappy lyrics. And it was only as I learned and as I wrote more and more that my lyrics got better, and eventually my lyrics turned into poetry. And from the poetry, I must have written at least 100 terrible poems before I wrote one good one, and then after that, I must have written at least 100 or a couple of hundred good poems before I wrote one that I consider great, or one that people tell me is a great poem. So yeah, you really have to put in the effort. There's no way around it. You've got to do the work, and you've got to write a lot. And yeah, another thing about great poetry is that it must be musical and have a beautiful form. What I mean by that is, to quote the author Michael Cunningham, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of his most famous novel is The Hours, he says that even in his prose, he must be able to read it to a foreigner who doesn't understand a single word of English, and that foreigner must be able to hear the musicality in it, the rhythm, the cadence of his words. So yeah, I believe that's true. If you read any great poem, you'll see that it's got a certain kind of musicality to it. It's got a certain form to it. And that's what you need. It doesn't need to rhyme. Most modern poetry doesn't actually rhyme. But yeah, there needs to be some kind of structure, some kind of form, some kind of musicality to it. It must be pleasing both to the ear and to the eye when you read it on the page. It must basically be beautiful even if you didn't understand a word of it. So yeah, but that said, I believe that great poetry is to a large degree fairly simple. It's understandable. It communicates clearly, and you can get the odd poem which is really complex and so on, and which is admired for its complexity and so on, and which is considered great for its complexity. But for me personally, I prefer simplicity and clarity in my poetry. And yeah, you got to find your voice. You got to do what you believe works for you. Another thing about great poetry is that it has phrases that resonate. For example, every great poet has a couple of these. Like we've got Robert Frost. One of his is "Good fences make good neighbors." You got Shakespeare, who probably has more phrases that resonate. By resonate, I mean that they last, that they stick in the mind, that they are memorable, and also have their own kind of, they can stand alone to a degree. For example, "To be or not to be," that one has endured. "Now is the winter of your discontent," that's another one. So yeah, you need to come up with short little phrases within your poetry that resonate, and this must come about naturally. You can't really force it, and the only way to bring this about naturally is to write a lot, and the more you write, and just to master the craft of being economical with your words, using as fewer words as possible to convey your idea clearly. I started off loving Friedrich Nietzsche's writing, mainly his axioms and maxioms and so on. His short phrases like "that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger" and so on. Because these little things, as he said, like, I don't want to be, 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 I don't those who write in blood and aphorisms don't want to be read but learned by heart. And if you can come up with phrases that endure, then you are being learned by heart, you are being remembered. And that's the goal here, is to write great poetry. Yeah, so that's one way to go about it. So I wrote a lot of maximums, and that really aided me when I got more serious about poetry, and I started to include short phrases in my poems which resonate. Let me think of one. The darker the clouds, the brighter the lightning. Those kind of things where you can encapsulate a strong idea in a few simple words. Another aspect of getting great at poetry is to do live poetry readings. This is very important in terms of getting feedback on your work. It kind of saves you from yourself. As creative people, we are very introverted, so we lose objectivity on our work. We might think it's great, but then when we get out in front of an audience, we might see, this bit isn't that great. The audience, I lost the audience there, and so on. And the beauty of live poetry readings is that you get a bunch of feedback from a whole crowd, so lots of individuals. You can see, at this stage of the poem I had everybody's attention and then I lost it there, and so on. So it's a good way to get a lot of feedback quickly. I understand that it could take time to develop confidence on stage, and that it definitely did with me, but it is a necessary thing to do in order to master your craft. Another thing is to, if you can afford it, or if you have friends who are willing to do it for you, literary friends, then you want to get your poems edited. Because, again, you're saving yourself from yourself. It's so easy to fall in love with the sound of your own voice and your own words. And yeah, getting it professionally edited, you might think that this bit was great and this bit was clear, but then the editor will tell you, I didn't understand what you were going on about here. And then you realize, okay, I need to clear that up. So it's a very useful tool in terms of refining your poetry and finding its best form. Okay, now on to the second rule that I mentioned, was to read a lot. And yeah, you've got to read a lot of poetry if that's what you're going to write. But specifically, if your aim is to write great poetry, then you need to read the great poets and the great poems, the poems that have endured for decades or centuries. Yeah, because it's basically input-output. If you're reading average poems or poems that your friend wrote and that kind of thing, then the input is not going to be of a high quality, and it makes it more difficult for the output to be of a high quality. So yeah, you want to read great poetry, and you want to read a lot of it, and that will help you aid great poetry, and also you'll get to know what great poetry is. You'll be able to recognize it more easily. Yeah, another thing that you need to read is you need to master books that help you master your craft. If you read a lot of books on how to write great poetry, then it will really help you in terms of your own writing, or not even just how to write great poetry. Read lots of those books, but also read books on just improving your writing in general. So the more you can improve your writing in general, the more your poetry will improve. And this sounds like a lot of effort, and it is, because this video is called How to Write Great Poetry. It's not called How to Write Poetry. If you just want to write to express yourself, or if you're happy just writing for the sake of writing, then you don't need to put in so much effort and to really master the craft and to do all of the things that I mentioned. However, if you're aiming for greatness, if you're aiming for if you're aiming for immortality in terms of your work, then you need to really do the work. There are no shortcuts in the long run. See, that's another resonating phrase of mine. You need to put in the work, you need to put in the effort, you need to master all the aspects of your craft, regardless. Okay, so that's my poetry video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you like this video, please press the like button and subscribe. And if you like content like this, please subscribe to my channel. And please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject. Thank you.